Hey everyone, lots going on here today. First of all, you're getting episode 182 of the Juicebox Podcast, which is called, More Good with Melinda. That's what I'm going to call it. More Good with Melinda. In the beginning of this episode, Melinda and I are going to talk about Izzy Meehan. Do you remember back in episode 149 when Izzy had a car accident? And we asked if you could send just love and support to her hospital room, which, by the way, you guys did over and over again. She got hundreds upon hundreds of messages, so I can never thank you enough for that. But here's the thing. This was recorded back then. This episode here, the one you're listening to right now. Is this convoluted? Just hold on. It'll make sense in a second. So the first couple of minutes are me talking about Izzy and her accident. Now, the good news is it's August now, and Izzy's doing much, much better. I just wanted to make sure you knew that up front. Also, in November, I'm giving the Type 1 Nation keynote speech in Izzy's hometown. So I'm actually going to get to meet her in person. Also, Izzy's coming on the podcast really soon to talk all about what happened to her. So that's a lot. But I just want to make sure you knew that before you listen to it, because it's a sad story, but, it's going very well for Izzy, especially considering the circumstances. Please remember that nothing you hear on the Juicebox Podcast should be considered advice, medical or otherwise. Yesterday was August 27th, 2018. Arden had her endocrinologist appointment where we got her A1C back. This one was kind of special for two reasons. One, Arden has been in full-on lady time now for, about 6 months. So, with maturity and all those hormones, everyone tells you what, your A1C, there's nothing you can do. It's going to go up. Just give up now, right? There's that. Plus, we've been using the new Dexcom G6. And everybody wants to know, you remember back in the episode I did where I did the review and people said, well, what do you think of the G6? And I said, in the end, we have to wait for Arden's A1C to come back to see if what I'm seeing on the glucose monitor is matching up with the results we're getting. Well, now we have all those answers. So today, interwound in this episode, I'm going to tell you the story of how we accomplished whatever Arden's A1C is. You'll find out later, but you're going to have to listen to the ads to find out, because Dexcom and Omnipod are a huge part of how we accomplished this. Okay, you guys ready? Here comes Melinda.
My name is Melinda Potberg, and I am a wife to an over-the-road truck driver. I'm a mom of 2 kids, ages 11 and 9, that both also have their own set of medical issues. I'm a professional IT analyst, and I'm a type 1 diabetic. I've been a diabetic for 32 years, since the age of 10. And I'm just living life in this super crazy circus of life.
Wow, 32 years?
Yeah.
Wow, that's a long time. So you go back a couple of generations of insulin technology.
Absolutely. And I think that was the main reason why I wanted just to reach out to you, is because I see a lot of, I just started this whole social media community, which has been really, really helpful for me within the last few years on Facebook and reaching out to other diabetics. And so I see a lot of newly diagnosed diabetics out there that it's overwhelming. Like, the whole rigmarole behind this disease is so different than any other disease out there that I see a lot of frustration, and everybody goes through it. But I just wanted to reach out and let everybody know, like, the hope that I feel after seeing all of the progress and where we started compared with where we are now. I've never been more hopeful in my life that this is not something that's going to end in the thing that we all worry is going to happen, that there's complications or death or, Lord only knows what else.
And your perspective is different at that range. It's the range of time that gives you the, you sort of like the ghost of Christmas past, present, and, hopefully future.
Absolutely.
You really get to see, like, I don't have perspective past 10 years. And to prove it, a couple of weeks, months after Arden was diagnosed back in 2006, it was the first time I saw somebody be like, hey, I cured diabetes in mice. And I actually thought, how lucky is Arden to have just gotten diabetes right when they're about to cure it?
Right. I think we all have gone through that. I mean, I was told that from the technology behind being able to read your blood glucose without poking your finger. My doctor told me about that the first year I was diagnosed. Oh, she won't have to poke her finger past, another year, and this technology is going to be available. And it never came, and it never came, and it never came. And now look at me. I've got computers that at the touch of a button on my smartphone, I can look and see what my blood sugar is. It's amazing. It's amazing to me what technology can do.
Yeah, I just glanced up at my screen and saw that Arden's blood sugar is 94 and stable. And
hey, we're almost twinsies. I'm at 101.
Very nice. Very nice. I'm in a weird position today because I'm feeling very strange. A listener of the podcast just contacted me yesterday, which I guess for context, I never usually give the dates, but maybe for context, I should. Today's February 8th because this won't go out, very soon. And she contacted me to let me know that she'd been listening to the podcast since its inception, and that it was just incredibly, I wish I had the word. She said it's been her greatest tool with diabetes with her daughter, who's been diagnosed, I think, for about 4 years and is 17 years old. But her daughter experienced a low blood sugar while she was driving and crashed her car rather severely.
I think I saw a post about this, and it's tragic, and I wanted to give more information just from my own perspective. It's heartbreaking. I don't know how the girl's doing, but I saw the same thing not too long ago. When I was expecting my second child, my first was 2.5 years old, and ironically, I was rushing to get him to the lab to have blood drawn to test and make sure that he wasn't diabetic himself. We were having a lot of overnight accidents, 2.5-year-olds, that tends to happen, but I was rushing to get him checked out for that, and rushing out the door. At the time, I was MDI, and I think what happened, the only thing in retrospect that I can figure out is I swapped the 2 bottles, and took my dose for my long-acting insulin with short-acting insulin. Pulled out, and 5 miles later, found myself with a cop knocking on my window and the right side of my car just completely scraped. A wing and a prayer that I didn't go over an overpass or hit another car, that my 2-year-old wasn't injured. Horrible guilt for that. Stuff like that happens, and it's terrifying.
Yeah, I have to say that. So the girl's name is Isabel Meehan, and I was speaking to her. I was speaking to her mom, and it was crazy that she started the conversation by saying, that just how proud she was of her daughter and how well she was taking care of herself, and how responsible and respectable she was with her diabetes and everything, and that the stuff we talk about here was translating to such a wonderful situation for her. And she's what she told me was the way that the girl had her accident. It had nothing to do with, being bold with insulin or anything like that. It just was one of those random things. Her blood sugar was stable. She thought it was right. She had experienced a high earlier. She pushed down. She caught it. She thought it was stable, and she got in the car to make a 10-minute drive home from school. And in that time, she just plummeted. And it happened too fast for the technology to kick in, or for her to feel it enough to do something in that moment. And as we're talking, I mean, this woman is devastated, as she rightly should be. Her daughter has multiple fractures in her neck and her spine. She broke her hand and her wrist. She broke teeth. She's really devastatingly injured. And they weren't certain, and actually they did not feel confident that she'd live through the night after the accident. But now, a week later, she's making this incredible progress. The mom actually reached out because she was looking for support. She was just hoping people would pray for her daughter, keep her in their hearts, send messages to the hospital. But she was still very confident that how they were managing was the right way, for them. And I don't know, it really struck me that we talk on the podcast in the abstract so much. And I'm sorry we're talking about this when we're supposed to talk about this stuff. Yeah. So we talk about it in the abstract, and I always say the same thing, if it's my time, it's my time. If it's my daughter's time, it's her time. But I'm not going to let her live her whole life with 200, 250 blood sugars, because that makes me feel safe, because all it's doing is kicking the health can down the road. And as I say those things, I recognize that someone is going to get a low blood sugar. And this poor girl, if this blow comes 15 minutes earlier, she's standing in her high school and she drops over, they call 911 and she's fine. You know, but instead, just randomly, she's in her car. And I was very impressed with her mother just still saying, I still wouldn't trade her health later for now, while we were talking, even in the middle of this sort of devastation. And it really helped me feel confident, because it is one of those things, right? Like we all say, oh, one day if I have a kid, and something happens, like I'd step in front of a bullet, I'd push them out of the way and get hit by a bus. And we say those things not really expecting that they're ever going to happen. And when we make the point that, you know, somebody is going to have an issue around their type 1 diabetes, you know, you have to admit, you never really think it's going to be you. You just think there's this mass of people, these millions of people who have type 1. Some of us aren't going to be as lucky as others, but it probably won't be me. And
absolutely.
Yeah.
And you just have to not keep that from scaring you. You know, like I said, I've got perspective. I don't know how my mom handled it. Now that I'm a parent of my own, my mother is a saint. Like, I have no idea how she went through what she went through with me and was able to give me the life experience of you've got to do it for you. She can't make me do it. And I think with your case and dealing with Arden, there's going to be days where she's probably going to rebel and not want a diabetic anymore.
Yeah, sure.
You know, that's going to happen. That's in your future. And giving her the skills to know, you know, the boundaries of how far she can push it. And life is going to kick you down. Stuff's going to happen. Just having those boundaries in place, having those things in place. I've got my Dexcom for a reason. You know, I mentioned my husband's an over-the-road truck driver. That is very much because I don't want my kids to wake up someday and find mom dead.
Yeah,
and that was a real possibility. That's the reason why I got it. You know, I've got those things in place at work. Everybody knows. And if I'm acting strange someday or burst out crying for no apparent reason, I want people to know. And I've not always been that confident in reaching out to other people. I'm a strong person. I can do it on my own. But when it comes to this disease, stuff happens. It really does. And it's going to happen. And you've got to have some sort of measures in place to protect you from that. So
no, well, I brought it up because we can't, as devastating and horrifying, and I'm heartbroken because I actually spoke with Haley. You know, I got to speak with Isabel's mom and to hear the real, like, truth in her voice. Like, it's not just in the abstract wondering about what it's like for your kid to have a tragic car accident. Like, I was hearing it from her firsthand for the first time in my life. But I still have to say that we people who live with diabetes, you really cannot let the randomness that happened to this poor girl affect the decisions that you're making moving forward.
Absolutely.
It would be a devastating mistake to just err on the side of caution, because all it's going to happen is we're going to go from one person, from 5 people having a random tragedy to everyone having a tragedy later in their life. And, you know, it sucks that's the call you have to make, but I'm going to make that call for Arden. I think the only way that it makes sense in my brain, and your podcast has really helped with this, along with the diabetic community out there on Facebook that I'm a member of now, has really helped me see that it's easy to not control your diabetes. It's much easier not to control it than it is to control it, because when your level is sitting at 250, 300 as a normal range, and all of a sudden you go out and exercise, or life kicks you in the face somehow and you dip down 50 to 100 points, you're still in a safe range. It's much easier to run high. And even doctors will tell you that. My doctor has been commented a few times on the fact that I'm having more lows than I normally have had, to the point that I'm not feeling them anymore. But when you're standing on the edge of a cliff, any slight bit of breeze can just push you over the edge. It is so much harder to be in control than it is not to. But that's not to say that it's not worth it. Have you seen the adorable pictures that Dancing for Diabetes just posted on their Instagram page? Have you? If you haven't, go to dancingfordiabetes.com. Scroll to the bottom of the page, click on the Instagram link. That's dancing4diabetes.com.
It's harder to be in control than it is not to. But that's not to say that it's not worth it.
I have a feeling, and I'm always need to preface by saying that I'm taking care of a person with diabetes, so I'm not trying to live my life and do it. I always imagine I'd be terrible as a diabetic. Like, just, because I don't care about myself the way I care about my kids, which
absolutely
probably is not right, but nevertheless. But so from a person who's managing someone else, I don't see a difference between any of the blood sugars. Like, I think if you can stay stable at one, you can stay stable at the other. But there's more to it than that. That stability comes from doing 1,000 things to create that stability. And that's where it's difficult. Like, you still have to pre-bolus correctly. You still have to, blah, 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 blah. There's all these things you have to do to stop a spike from happening. If you stop your spike from happening, then you probably stop a low later. And, somebody said recently, and I've been saying it a lot lately, but highs cause lows. And Isabel's situation is an example of that. She wasn't able, her mom tells me, she wasn't able to pre-bolus the way she wanted to at school. So her blood sugar shot up. She corrected it, and then she started to fall really fast. She stopped. She thought she had stopped it properly, and probably did. But then it kicked back in again, and it started to go down again. And that's sort of what I mean by it's not, I don't think it's harder at any level. I think that it takes more steps. Like, anybody can sit at 250 because, like you said, if you fall 50 points, you're still it doesn't matter.
Right.
When, like, I'm looking at Arden's blood sugar right now, it's 88. So while you were talking just before, I texted her and I said, hey, turn your basal off for a half hour. And she said, okay. And that was it. And that is a step. You know what I mean? Like,
yep.
She's not going to alarm at 88. She would never have thought to do that on her own. Had I not looked up and saw it, I wouldn't have thought of it. And to be honest, if I wasn't talking to you, I wouldn't be looking at her blood sugar. So, there are extra steps. But I hear what you're saying. Like, when you're that close, any little thing turns into more of a panicky situation. And that's
right.
a difficult way to live, especially, and I have no perspective from your angle, like what it's like to be an adult, taking care of yourself. It's a whole different thing. It's something that's coming in the future for Arden. Scares the hell out of me, honestly. So
she'll be fine. Deep breath, Papa. Deep breath. She'll be fine.
I'm sure she
I'm
will.
living proof.
Yeah, you certainly are. So let's talk about that for a second. You're diagnosed at 10. That's got to be. Is that NPH and regular back then?
Yes, regular and NPH. And it was difficult in the aspect that I was super, super thin. I think the interesting part about it is I went to my doctor's office, and my doctor at the time had just had a quadruple bypass. So there was a new doc in the building that wanted to do an entire gamut of tests just to get up to speed on my medical history and whatnot. Mm-hmm. And one of those happened to be a urinalysis that showed massive amounts of sugar. I think without that, it might have been a few days before this was caught. I think that they were testing for stomach issues because I was having a lot of stomach issues at the time. I was down quite a bit of weight, but it was flu season. So, was it just a matter of me fighting off some bug? I think that this doctor probably was the first step in it. And I'm from a small town in North Platte, or in western Nebraska, North Platte, where we're far away from a big city. And so there were no endocrinologists in town at the time. Mm-hmm. There's a children's hospital here in Omaha, where I live now, that the head of the endocrinology department of children's, he wasn't at the time, but would go out to the small communities in western Nebraska every 3 months and just make his rounds and do tests and meet with patients and that sort of thing. Oh, wow. So it was kind of just a cool situation that this doctor was able to diagnose me. My parents scooped me up, brought me here to Omaha, got me the help that I needed. But the help, quite frankly, was not, we were told at the time, she's going to have a decreased life. She's going to develop complications. The best you can expect is for her to be healthy until she's 40 years old. At that point, then eyes are probably going to go, feet are probably going to go. You can just do the best you can do. And the control of it, regular and NPH, was just one piece of it. The other piece of it was, I'm thankful now that we didn't have to do the urine strips, but the blood testing, I didn't even have a glucometer for the first 5 years that I was diagnosed. Okay. It was a test strip. So you got a huge, massive hanging drop of blood. You put it on the test strip and you waited a certain amount of time. I want to say it was a minute or two. Mm. And then you wiped the blood off and you waited another minute. And then you lined it up like a litmus test on the side of the bottle to guess at where your blood sugar was.
Yeah, that's pretty old-timey.
Right. So I go from that to now, like I said, it's at the touch of a button and I can see any second of any day where I'm at.
That's fascinating.
It's magic.
And it really would feel like that to you, because what you just described, from my perspective, is probably so inaccurate and And such a struggle that, I mean, you must have just, every time you had to do it, you must have thought like, I don't want to do this because.
Oh, and there was probably a good, I'm going to say in college, 2 years where I got rid of the glucose meter. It wasn't working. I didn't bother to get a new one, so I just didn't test.
Yeah.
At all.
And that's an easy decision to make back then because the technology supports the decision to not try. What the doctor told your parents supports the decision to not try. You're really just trying. Right. You're just trying to get to 40. Like that's
absolutely.
Yeah. It's really. I mean, what you're describing is such an incredible turnover of expectation. More than anything else, it's fascinating to think that that's only 30 years. It's such a short time in the world of technology and medical advancements. It's when it's your own life, much like when we were talking about with Isabel before, like when it's in the abstract, I can say, wow, 30 years, look how quick that is. But in the focus of your life, it's your whole life.
It is. And I feel like I've just finally started living it too. That's the thing. So, back then it was all about exchanges and you ate a certain type of food, a certain amount of food at every meal, which also meant that at the drop of the hat, I couldn't go out and go for a run, that I had to make sure on the days that I had gym class that my whole meal plan was planned out a certain way, that I had to make sure I took the gym class at a certain time of the day and my mom had to be involved, and how embarrassing that was to, like I said, she's a saint. I have no idea how she did it now that I've got kids of my own. It's hard, but
she loved you. That's what she did. That's all,
But all of those things go to the point that there was no spontaneity. I'm finally at a place in my life where there are diabetics out there that have decided that for their own health that they're going to cut out carbs.
Right.
And I can respect that, but I'm not willing to do that anymore.
Well, you did it for a long time.
I'm not willing to not exercise. I'm not willing to not go whitewater rafting down a river like I did, a few months back. Those things are important, and I want to be able to do them and live a quote unquote normal life, even though I've got this thing that is always looming in the background.
Let me ask you a question about back then. Feeling. I'm sorry. Let me ask you a question about back then when you're managing like that. With what you know now, right? Can you, in hindsight, look at how you were managing then and think of a better way to do it, even with just that technology? Could you have done better? Like, could you go back to that time and do better now?
Not back in the mid 80s, I couldn't have, but even in the early 90s, I'm telling you what, I was so resistant to being on a pump of any way, shape, or form. I didn't want cords dangling off of me and being attached to a machine, even up until 5 years ago when there wasn't a choice, and I found Omnipod. Okay. Even now, I can't imagine having tubes, but that was the best decision I ever made in my life, and I'm kicking myself that I didn't go on a pump sooner.
Okay, so all we talk about on this show is how insulin works, right? The timing and the amount, being bold. And Arden does that with an Omnipod tubeless insulin pump. But how did that make her A1C what it is today? Let me tell you. It's the little things that you don't think about. Temp basal increases, temp basal decreases, extended boluses. All of these things that right now you may think, that's scary, I don't know how to do that. But it's not. And if you listen to the podcast, we talk about how to do it. You'll be able to figure it out. But the ability to manipulate the insulin, to get it to be working when you need it to work, that's the whole key. The rest of it is ease of use. The rest of it is not having to disconnect for sports or bathing. If you want to know how Arden's A1C is lower, it's because when Arden gets in the shower every day for 20, 30 minutes, she's not disconnected from her insulin pump. We're still maintaining her blood sugar where we want it to be. When she goes to gym class, to her softball games, to her softball practices, all of those times, Arden's always connected because the Omnipod is this tiny little device that you wear. You don't have to take it off to run around or to do things. And then you use the features. And the features are how you manipulate your blood sugar. We're getting closer to finding out what our A1C is. You're going to find out in the Dexcom ad soon. But first, commit this to your memory. myomnipod.com/juicebox, or click on the links in your show notes or at juiceboxpodcast.com, because Omnipod would like to send you out a free, no obligation demo pod that you can actually try on and see for yourself.
that was the best decision I ever made in my life. And I'm kicking myself that I didn't go on a pump sooner.
What stopped you from doing it when it was first available? Because I've talked to other people, but I'm interested, like what, when you said, oh, I can get an insulin pump, what was the thing that stopped you? What was your barrier to entry, I guess?
Just being attached to a machine. To me, that felt so artificial, number one. And number two, I wasn't comfortable with myself or with, like I said, the accepting of help. That was a thing that somebody could see and tell that I was different. Mm-hmm. Whereas I could sneak off to the bathroom and take a shot and nobody would even know that I'm a diabetic.
Gotcha. And so when somebody initially says, hey, if you get this thing, here's the stuff you can do with it and it might improve, you were like, that's not enough to sell me over the things that
exactly
that are holding me back. So what eventually pushed you over the edge? What was your first pump?
Omnipod, and I've only been on it for about 5 years. And what pushed me over the edge was the situation that I was in, where I was having frequent overnight low blood sugars to the point of ambulances being called.
And your husband's not home. Like, I have a friend who was an over-the-road truck driver for a long time, and he's not home like all the time, but in any kind of real schedule either, I would imagine. Yeah,
during the week he's gone. And so he's home usually on the weekends. And the 2 times that it happened, I've gone into convulsions 4 times in my life. The first was when I was a child, and it was sun related. I got a horrible sunburn and didn't eat properly, wasn't feeling well. I think it was probably heat stroke, and that did it. The other 3 times, the second time was alcohol related. I wasn't taking care of myself. I had drank too much the night before, and that caused it. The last 2 times were just completely random, that the insulin was, because I was MDI, there was no way to have a certain basal amount overnight that was different. I need half the insulin at night than I do during the day with MDI. You just can't do it. Mm-hmm. And so unless I'm eating a full meal directly before bed, it was sending me way low overnight. And thank goodness both times my husband was there. Otherwise, I can tell you I wouldn't be here today. And again, that scares me to death to think that it would be my kids that are finding me.
But no, I can't imagine what that would do to a child long term.
Right. So it was necessity over anything else. And I was still resistant to it until after I got it. And I thought, why didn't I do this sooner? And of course, my endocrinologist said, I've been telling you for years now. But again, I honestly think, and I'm not just saying this because it's Omnipod, but this is the most amazing thing because I can still hide it. I don't have to carry this thing on me. I throw it in my purse and away I go. When I need it, I pull it out. It's the coolest thing ever.
And the steps, I was just talking about this with somebody yesterday, honestly, but the steps from when you pull it out of the packaging till when it's on and it's functioning, it's so quick. It's fascinating. Like last night, Arden's Omnipod was like, hey, beep, beep, beep at 3 a.m. This pod's not going to work anymore. And I'm like, yeah, sure. So I'm doing stuff in the evening. And then she went upstairs with Kelly to watch Big Brother Celebrity, which they seemed very excited about. And they were doing that and, snacking before bed and doing all this stuff. And everything was fine. Arden goes to bed. I stay up. I do some more stuff. I'm coming up and I'm tired at this point. It's like midnight. And it hit me. I was like, oh gosh, we didn't change our pump. And I was like, it's okay, right? So I try to imagine, I walked back downstairs, grabbed the pod, grabbed some insulin, walked back upstairs, pulled out the syringe, boom, pulled out the insulin, stuck it in the pod, walked into her room, shut her pod down, pushed the button to prime the other one. While I did that, I walked into the bathroom, got like a warm washcloth. I lifted her shirt while she was sleeping, pulled off the old pod, wiped her stomach down, let it dry, put the old pod on, pushed the button, and left. The whole thing might have taken 5 minutes.
Yep.
And she was sleeping. And she as she felt me stick the other pod on, she sat up and she was, hey, what's happening? And I was like, I said, hey, I forgot to put your pump on. We forgot to swap your pump tonight. And she goes, okay. Give me a second to get myself together. And she was so funny because she was sound asleep. I was like, Arden, you can just lay back down. She's like, wait. Okay. And then she laid back down and I pushed the button. She's like, oh, and she likes to scratch around it after it goes in. She scratched, her eyes went closed. I put the blanket back over and she was asleep.
I'm telling you what, you're setting her, whoever her future husband is, you're setting him up for some high standards.
Well, don't worry. My wife has beaten me into this situation, so I'm sure she'll be able to do the same thing to somebody.
like, oh, honey, just take care of it. If only I could tell my husband that. Can you just take care of it? I'm tired. I'm going to bed.
I'm going to lay here. You put my new pod on for me.
Yeah.
Well, but so, most of the time she's completely involved in doing that. But what's I going to do? Wake her up? And I don't know. It just
right.
didn't
Absolutely.
seem necessary. But the point is that thing, the person who designed that really thought about the functionality of it in your life, not just it giving you insulin. And I think it's, to your point, I think it's an absolute life changer, and every day I'm grateful for it. So I'm glad you found it.
I did, and I'm fingers crossed. I'm just waiting for the continuous closed loop. Mm-hmm. I am praying that sometime within the next year or two, like promised, we're gonna be getting that. So because I'll sign up. I'll be a trial patient. I'll be a lab rat. Whatever you want me to be. It's that important to me. Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what, today's the 8th of February. I just booked the COO of Omnipod for the show on the 27th of February. So that'll come out right then. She's got 3 big announcements they want to talk about. I don't even know what they are at the moment. But I'm going to press her really hard because I know the closed loop is still, I think, slated 2020 or something like that. But I'm gonna get as much out of her as I can. So take advantage of our relationship here and pressure. So
I'm sure you're feeling the same thing though. Like, wouldn't that just be amazing? It's hands off, other than when you're eating. Just talk to each other, figure it out.
Yeah, I have to say that I can't imagine it's ever going to be like perfect but it's going to be so much better. And the alleviation of just your need to think about things so constantly is what I look forward to the most. Like it's actually going to be on my daughter for 2 or 3 years before she goes to college. I'm excited about that. I am, like I said before, Arden diagnosed it. She's 13 now. She'll be 14 this summer, so she's coming up on. But I'm tired. You know what I mean? Like I really want it to stop or at least slow down a little bit so that I can just. I'm tired of taking my clothes off at the end of the night next to my bed and thinking, okay, I'm tired, but I can't go too far. Like I can't sleep too deeply. I can't I really do want that stuff to go away. And at the same time, I don't know if it will or not. Like I hope it will. I hope that I'm not so far indoctrinated into this that I can't let go of it. I think I can. And I'm excited to find out if I can.
Being able to trust the technology, that right there helps to alleviate that. So, again, back to the online community, there are still people that don't trust to bolus off of the Dex. Mm-hmm. I've been doing that since the beginning, FDA approved or not. It's been that accurate for me. So why not use that information to my benefit? I'll call myself a bad diabetic. I don't calibrate as much as I should, but again, my numbers have been right on. So why not use that? Why not, the whole no calibration piece of things that may or may not be coming. Well, I don't know. I'm gonna push it to its limits until it proves me otherwise. So there's times when it's off, but for the most part, it works. So why not do that? Why not use it?
Yeah, I can't agree more. I have the exact same experience, honestly. Like there are times, where it says one thing and you're another thing, but then you test, and the longer you use it I think you get in that situation where you go, this is one of these moments I should test. Maybe
right.
And there's plenty of times where I don't have that feeling, and people listen all the time while I'm recording the podcast and I'm giving Arden her, her bolus for her lunch, and there are times where I think, just test and check. And there's times when I'm like, no, this is okay. Like, I can tell. And
sure.
It's just, I don't know. It's experience. And
can she feel her levels? Can she feel her numbers?
Yeah, she knows.
Does she know where she's at without looking?
She knows when she's falling. She can feel falling. And she knows low. I would say she starts feeling her low around 65. And at 55, she starts talking about it a little more animatedly. Like at 65, I think you could still talk her into just kind of lounging around and being like, maybe this will still be okay. But at 55, she gets up and starts talking about, food or something like that.
Right.
It's, but high is, she hasn't been high in so long that I don't know. I know she gets pretty crappy feeling when it pops up, but we are at this point, I would say that a 24-hour graph for us pretty consistently looks like there are 2 spikes in 24 hours. And those spikes, when I call them spikes, they maybe go to 180 and they get back pretty quick. They're usually because of life. Like she comes home from school or something happens and not everybody's paying as close of attention, and maybe the pre-bolus on an after-school snack doesn't work the same or something like that. And I would say that she's under 70 probably twice a day, not usually for any length of time.
Sure.
And I'd say that once a week, 4 times a month, she gets into that 55 spot where it doesn't feel like you can get out of it. Where you're 55 and you eat something and then you wait and you're 55. And then, you turn
you're going to pay for it later the more that you eat.
Well, you turn off the insulin and you're 55. And then, like an hour later, you're 62 and you're like, should I turn the insulin back on here? Like that probably happens a handful of times a month. But, it's nothing devastating. I think it's the expectation. I think if I kept Arden's blood sugar at 200 all the time, we'd still hint those, hey, it's 55 and doesn't want to go back up situations.
Right.
And probably more frequently, I think she'd be low more frequently because I'd see those big numbers and, all of a sudden it's a bunch of insulin and really you're just bolusing the blood sugar. There's no food in your system or something like that. And
yep.
Once that blood sugar comes down, that insulin's still there. That's when you get in trouble.
Well, I think the thing that really, really helps me, and like I said, listening to your podcast did that, is that the whole bold with insulin thing means less to me about not being scared of how much you're taking and more just about, like you talk about those little bumps and nudges, that I just brought my high alert down to 30. Yeah. Very soon I'm going to be bringing it down to 20 because I'm feeling 130. Yep. 130. I'm going to be bringing it down to 120. I knew what I meant. Just because at 140, I feel terrible.
Okay.
And that's not normal for me just because my blood sugars were high for so long that a 200 was nothing to scoff at. Now 200, I'm nauseous and sweaty and thirsty, and that's, 140, I'm like that. I'm starting to feel a little unwell.
Yeah.
That's a normal range. I'm reacting normally to a 140 blood sugar.
Yeah, I think I can't tell you, like you're talking about that. It sounds horrible. And I'm like, oh, good for you, because it really, it's Arden's Dexcom alerts at 130. My Follow app alerts at 120, and it's just so that you can do something. It's
right.
Not, it's not like I don't, if her blood sugar is 120, I'm not like, oh my God, can you believe it? But it kind of snaps you back into the situation. Like, hey, is this just a 120 that drifted up and the arrow is still stable? Or is this a diagonal up arrow or a straight up arrow? Like, is she unexpectedly jumping up? Because then you can make these, like you said, bumps and nudges to stop it. And you don't get into a situation where you're sending yourself all this insulin to fix a high later. And that's what gets you on the roller coaster is
right.
Is that.
And similarly, I've got my low alert set to 80, just because if I'm 80, I need to at least be looking at it to see what direction's the arrow pointing. If I'm 80 going up, not a big deal. Mm-hmm. If I'm 80 double arrow down, well, okay, we probably need to do something now rather than waiting until I get to 70.
Yeah. I'd like to know that. We're at 70, but I agree with you. I think 80 is a very legitimate low blood sugar threshold for your Dexcom. It's completely real. Arden doesn't fall fast. Almost ever, and I have to be honest, I attribute that to the Apidra, the insulin.
Okay.
Because she was on Novolog before Apidra. Novolog, I would see double arrows up and double arrows down all the time. Single arrows up, single arrows down all the time. I never, ever, not never, but completely infrequently do we see an arrow straight down that we don't cause on purpose. And so
that's great.
Yeah, and that I really do, I really believe that it's the Apidra that just works really well for Arden. It might suck for you, but it works great for her.
Well, I think that the only thing that with all of these technologies that has sucked the most is the insurance and the hoops we have to jump through even just to get them. We're blessed to be at a point in our lives that honestly, if insurance decided they wanted to stop covering them, I would still be on them anyway. And I'm lucky to feel that way, but you shouldn't have to have a decent job to be able to afford the technologies or to get it covered by insurance just because the insurance I'm a ways away from retirement, but I'm happy to see finally that Medicare is saying that Dexcom is a legitimate thing.
Right. Omnipod too. They just finally figured out that Omnipod is something they should be covering too. So,
right.
But you just said something that made me think about something we were talking about earlier. Let's see if I can focus my thoughts enough to get it out. Dancing for Diabetes 18th annual show is coming up, and you can audition online virtually. Go to dancing4diabetes.com/show. You just said everyone should have this stuff because back when you were 10, a doctor was telling you this is going to basically suck. It's going to be inexact. It's going to cause you medical problems, blah, blah, blah. There are still people today who are more or less still in that situation. It's better because analog insulin and meters are better and things like that. But still, if you can't afford or if someone won't allow you to have a CGM or a pump, you really still are. You're in the modern version of this sucks if you want that stuff and can't get it for financial reasons.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and insurance companies, anybody who's controlling the purse strings of our life has to, at some point, they have to see that this stuff it's not a nice to have. You know what I mean?
Right.
That's how they treat it. They treat it like it's a nice to have.
And it scares me that you can only get a certain number of supplies too. You ask a diabetic that's on any of these supplies if they've got a stash of them, and I guarantee you they do, just because it's our lifeline.
Yeah.
You can't go without. So waiting for the insurance company to approve something, you've got to have a stash to back you up.
Yep.
Because you can't go without. It's terrifying.
Everybody's got a drawer or a corner of a closet or something, or you come up eligible again for stuff you don't need and you buy it anyway, and it's silly, to be perfectly honest. Why is it like that? Why can't it just be I need it when I need it, and you don't fight me about it?
Right.
Yeah. Some of the worst arguments I've ever had are genuinely on the phone with an insurance company since my daughter's had diabetes. It really is. It is fascinating to feel someone across the phone from you just fighting so hard to make your life worse. It's
right.
It's a fascinating, odd conversation to be in. Why are you doing this? I paid my bill. And when I stop and look at how much we pay for insurance, it is a massive amount of money every year. And, and still they're like, no, you can't have that. I'm like, and you find yourself thinking, it's only $800. I gave you multiple thousands of dollars already this year.
Exactly.
And you feel good about that. There are some people who have the balls, Melinda, to just kind of insure themselves and say, I know nothing catastrophic is going to happen, and if I just buy all the things I need this year, it'll be less than insurance. I do not have the nerve to be the person to do that, but I do know some people that do. And
well, we're kind of straddling a line right now where our company provides a high deductible plan. So the first 8 months of the year, we're out of pocket for everything. And, I mentioned both of my kids have ADHD. And so their medications, what works for them to be able to function in society is really trial and error as well. Kind of like this whole diabetes thing, that it's you got to try and figure out what's right for you. But because of that, we're trying out different medicines to see how they work that are $300, $400, $500 a pop out of pocket.
Wow. Because
it's the high deductible plan. Same thing with mine. We pay thousands of dollars every single month just in prescriptions. So it's at that point in time where you look at, my husband and I were talking, it's like, well, what would happen if we just stopped paying the insurance and went out of pocket for everything? Would we really be paying that much more, or would it be about the same? And
it's just such a risk.
Terrible.
And scary. And my gosh. Oh, both your kids have ADHD?
They do. My house really is a circus. It's, but it's kind of interesting. So medical aside, their medicine ties into their behavior, and they're very cognizant of that. Mm-hmm. With the Dexcom, I'm realizing how much blood sugar ties into my behavior. And there was a point in time where I was dropping very drastically, not paying attention to my phone, having an argument with my children about them picking something up or cleaning something or not listening to mom, whatever the case may be. And I totally overreacted. And both kids are looking at me like mom's crazy. She's absolutely gone insane. And I don't have other adult in the house to back me up to say, hey, do you think maybe something else is going on here? And after the fact, I thought, oh, this is terrible. I feel like an awful person because this was something medical that was happening and my kids didn't understand it, just the same way that sometimes something medical is happening in their brain.
Yeah, right.
And they're not understanding their behavior. So we've got a deal now where at any point in time, if I'm acting in a way that's different than what they would expect me to act, they can ask at any point in time without me saying no what my blood sugar is. And I can hand them my phone and they're able to check. Oh. So they're kind of a little lifeline too, that I want them to be comfortable enough to know that, no, mom's mad because I did something wrong, not because her blood sugar's dropping.
So you have the reverse thing that when people say to their kids, if I check your blood sugar and you're not low, you're in trouble. And you have the reverse where they can say to you, hey, listen, let's call a timeout, check your blood sugar. And you can say, look, if my blood sugar is okay,
you're in trouble.
You're in trouble. Well, that's really, you know what, that is a really open and thoughtful way to handle that. You should be applauded for that. That's really something, because when you first started talking about it, my gut reaction was, gosh, don't give your kids that kind of control over you. But then as you explained it, I thought, no, she's right. She's 100% right. Like, it is absolutely, there are so many small balances going on in the human body constantly, in your brain, and, you're with your insulin, like all that stuff. When you get a little bit one way or the other, I mean, I just know a person who doesn't have diabetes. They just get low blood sugar sometimes.
Right.
And this person grew up their whole life with people just calling her nasty all the time. Like, oh, she's such a nasty girl. Like, that, and think of how unfair that is to her.
They call it hangry, right? That normal people get hangry. Well, that's blood sugar related, I guarantee you.
Yeah. Oh, exactly. Absolutely. I say to my wife sometimes, I'm like, hey, you should eat something. Like, she gets like a little, like, kind of far away look in her face or something. And we have tested her blood sugar in the past and saw that she's lower when that happens. So my son comes home from school. When he's hungry, he's a jerk. Like, I don't know another way to. He's a baseball player, and when at the end of a game, I've learned over the years, I don't even talk to him till he's eaten something. Like,
just throw some food at him.
Literally like a lion coming after you. Like, oh, we'll throw a steak on the ground, and by the time it's done, it won't want to kill me anymore. Like, it really is. It's fascinating. Like how he just exerts everything while he's out there. He doesn't like drinks with sugar in them, so his sports drinks, are water or something that doesn't have carbs in it usually. And so he'll do things like eat bananas while he's playing or stuff like that, but sometimes it just doesn't work out. And after the game, he's just like, I look at him, and my wife used to text, how'd the game go? And I'm like, I don't know, I can't. She's like, ask Cole. I'm like, oh, not yet.
Don't poke the bear.
We joke all the time about Arden, like, don't look her right in the eyes.
It's funny that's another thing so my husband is very in tune with my blood sugars as well. And from my standpoint, I don't know what it is that he's seeing, but it always amazes me too when he looks at me out of the blue and I think I'm sounding perfectly rational and think that I'm doing everything, completely normal. And he says to me, are you low? What's going on? Like, how did you know? It's like, I don't know. There's just some weird look in your eye or something.
Well, and also he had to learn that for his own personal safety. So
absolutely.
That's a good motivator. You guys wouldn't even be married anymore if you didn't figure that out.
Very true.
So back in the Omnipod ad, we talked about manipulating insulin with the Omnipod tubeless insulin pump. But how do we make the decisions about when to manipulate the insulin, when to add more, to subtract more, to be more aggressive, less aggressive? How do we know when to be bold? Well, those decisions are made with the data that comes back from the Dexcom G6 continuous glucose monitor. And for all of you who are wondering, well, can we trust it? I don't know. Dosing, I know the FDA says it's okay, but I don't know what to do. Well, we do. Of course, your results may vary, but I make Arden's insulin decisions based on the information that I get back from the Dexcom G6. You can go to dexcom.com/juicebox or click on the links in your show notes or at juiceboxpodcast.com to find out more about the Dexcom and how it helped us get Arden's A1C in a span of time when she was becoming a lady and we were using the G6 for the first time. That's what's been going on for the past couple of months. And yet her A1C, when it was tested yesterday at her endocrinologist office, was 5.4. In this last week, Arden has had Dunkin' Donuts, Apple Jacks, and Chinese food, I kid you not, 5.4. The Dexcom G6 gives you the information. The Omnipod makes it possible for you to manipulate your insulin the way you want and to wear it constantly without having to take it off, disconnect for showering or bathing or anything like that. And then the rest is being bold with insulin. 5.4. If I say it a couple more times, I'm going to start crying. My daughter eats like a regular person. She uses the Omnipod and the Dexcom, and her A1C is 5.4 with no significant lows. I don't think my A1C is 5.4. I can see it on Arden. I can see it on the people. I'm sure they can see on me when I'm, there are times where my wife will just look at me and go, how about if you just go to sleep? And I'm like, no, I'm good. And she's like, you're not good.
Just trust me. Trust me.
Yeah, it's gone too long. Take a nap. And then you go like I do. Sometimes I'll go lay down and I'll think, this is ridiculous. And then, 3 hours later, I'm like on the sofa, not sure what time it is, But yeah, it's good to have people around you that understand your situation, have your back. And it's cool that you put your kids in that situation because they're going to feel comfortable moving forward, putting someone else in that situation for them. And I think
I'm hoping so.
Yeah. Unless
we need each other.
Well, that's certainly true in the large scale and in a family way, just as well. Okay, so we're doing good here. We got about 10 more minutes left. 15 more minutes left. Have we not spoken about anything yet that you were really interested in talking about?
Like I said, the one thing that I just wanted to get across, I told you I didn't want to come off as being a curmudgeon the whole back in my day. We used to have to blah, blah, blah stuff, but it's just that we are on the edge of something that is, I've heard it over and over again, that a cure's coming, and some people are very, it's never happening. I have never in my life felt more sure that in my lifetime it's possible that I would not have to be burdened with this disease anymore than right now. That the transplants that are happening where they're trying to implant islet cells was one thing, but this idea that there's already a cure out there, it's just being approved through the FDA from the what am I thinking of? The immunization, that trial that's going on.
I might not know about that one. Is that tell me a little bit about it if you know.
I want to say it's a tuberculosis immunization that they have found has helped with the immune system. And
is that God, she was on the podcast.
She was. I'm trying to remember her name as well.
I've done too many of these podcasts. Now I just realized. I'll think of it in a minute, but I think so. Here's what I think. I think your hopefulness comes from how long you've been in it and the progress that you're seeing. Like you can feel hopeful about it because of that. I can. Yeah, and that's maybe.
And my life's been more normal than ever too. That's the thing is I don't have to worry about it every second of every day just because of the technology that's out there.
Right.
Closed loop is one thing. Cure is another thing. What does cure mean? Well, it might not mean that my pancreas is ever going to be normal.
Right.
But cure to me just means that I don't have to think about it, that I don't have to be burdened with it, that I don't have to keep myself from eating the cake in the break room, that I don't have to, worry about passing out in the middle of the street, just walking back and forth. It
doesn't necessarily mean like your pancreas magically works again. It's an upgrade and a serious life upgrade for you.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah. So
it means I don't have to be involved.
So were you talking about Denise Faustman?
Yes.
Dr. Faustman. Okay. So the really interesting thing I found about her interview, and if you go back and listen to it again, I don't think she thinks that's what's going to happen. I think that's so it's hard for me to put into words exactly, but I'm sorry, I'm telling Arden she should drink the rest of it. She's having a little bit of juice and she's like, can I just drink the rest of it so I don't have to hold on to it? I told her, I'm like, can you drink half a juice? And she's like, okay. And then just now she's like, can I just get the rest of it so I don't have to so it doesn't have to sit here? I was like, sure.
You have got the most compliant daughter in the world. I just have to tell you, you need to count your blessings right there.
You think so? I don't know.
No, yeah, I would be texting my son and he would not answer me for an hour. And by that point, I'd be standing outside the door of the school. And I don't know.
No, she's trained like Pavlov's dog. If she doesn't answer, she doesn't answer. I sent that horrible find your iPhone tone. And that snapped her right into it. She realized it was better to answer a text than to have that happen. But I think that if I'm remembering correctly, my expectation for what Dr. Faustman was saying was based on what the community thought of her work. But she never really said what people say about her. Like, she's not looking at it like a cure. And it was interesting. Like, go back and listen to it again. It was just, it was very interesting. But I agree with you. I agree that there is so much stuff going on. Any number of them would be amazing. I always think like like you were just talking about the islet cell implantation. That'd be amazing. Like just to go to your doctor every couple of years and have another patch full of cells put under your skin. Okay, I take that. A closed loop system that just keeps you from having to worry all the time. I'll take that. I'll take anything that's better.
Right.
But what I heard from you that was most exciting was that you were just hopeful after a long period of not being able to feel that way. I think that might be more important than if any of it actually comes to fruition, like as crazy as that might sound.
Because life already is better.
Right. Yeah. And that was the part I never understood when the JDRF made their kind of switch from like, we're going to cure this, which if you're paying attention, you had to know was like, part of their marketing plan. Don't worry, we're going to, right? And to like, we're going to help you live better and we're going to look for improvements and help fund improvements. People are like, boo, cure. And I'm like, were you not paying attention? Nobody was curing it. It wasn't happening. Like, it's good to have more good. Don't turn your nose up at more good. I hope I don't end up calling the episode More Good, because that's totally incorrect. I could. You never know what I'm going to do. I edit them later, and I'm always doing it at night, and I'm like completely goofy. So if you look back at the titles, my wife's like, should the titles not have something to do with the episode? I'm like, it doesn't matter. But I'm just... I was just really elated to hear you talk about it just now. It's really, it's uplifting to hear how uplifted you are. And,
well, this thing is not easy. It's not. And I mentioned at the beginning that Arden's going to go through times where she just doesn't want to do it anymore. You've had times like that too, where you're like, I don't have the physical energy to be able to focus one more second on this thing called living. Yeah. I can't. And that sounds terrible, but you're going to go through phases like that because it's such a toll, more so than any other disease on the planet, where you've got a team of doctors standing behind you making the decisions that we make second by second, day by day, that we have to. And because of that, I don't know. Life is good right now. It really is.
Well, that just made me feel like what you just said just made me feel like the real bonus to like closed loop, for example, might be just if you can lessen that feeling, then maybe it takes longer to get to the forget it, or maybe you never get to the forget it. Maybe it's tolerable enough that burnout isn't as prevalent.
Right.
That'd be interesting. I'm actually going to interview somebody in like a week who is going to talk about burnout and some of the kind of devastating things that happen to them when they stop paying attention to their blood sugar. Hopefully that's interesting and not. I
think it's important to talk about.
Yeah. Now I'm excited for it. Wow. So you were, may I say something? At the beginning, you said, and I might have to leave it in so that it makes sense here. You said how nervous you were at the beginning. You have not once. Now, I tried to talk at the beginning to make you more comfortable. Like I kind of filibustered for a second to give you time to relax, but you have not come off as nervous once during this. Do you feel better?
Oh, good. I do feel a little bit better. Sometimes you can't shut me up. That's how my nerves manifest themselves. So.
Well, listen, perfect. Because we're recording you talking.
I guess that's a good thing.
Absolutely is.
Well, I love your show. Whatever it is, the people you're having on, keep on doing it, because like I said, it's going to continue to give me hope, and it gives me the skills that I need just to keep on going on. So there's other people out there going through it too, and I feel like you know where I'm coming from.
No, I appreciate that. I really do. It's my intention to do exactly that, and I'm happy to see it's happening. Like I said, going all the way back to the beginning, to talk to Haley Meehan about her daughter who just had this horrible thing happen to her, and to still hear her talking about this, like, I know this is the right thing to do. It gives me a lot of hope for everybody listening, and for myself, honestly, with my daughter. I really appreciate you taking the time and doing this. Thank you so very much.
Absolutely. Thank you.
A sincere thank you to Dexcom and Omnipod for everything that you've brought to my daughter's life. I couldn't be more grateful. Thank you also to Dancing for Diabetes. That's dancing4diabetes.com for helping sponsor the show. You can check out Dexcom at dexcom.com/juicebox. Omnipod at myomnipod.com/juicebox. Dancing for Diabetes, I just said that one. You can always click on the links in the show notes or at juiceboxpodcast.com if you can't remember them. Hey, one last thing, and this is kind of disconnected, but I recorded before Arden's endo appointment. Yesterday was a busy day. I recorded an hour's worth of interview time for the BBC. They asked me a bunch of parenting questions, which was interesting. I had to go to a studio and record and everything, and that'll be out in September sometime. If it turns out good, I'll send you a link. I don't know what they're going to do with it. You know what? I'm a little distracted today. I'm so sorry. I forgot to say Melinda was amazing on the episode. Thank you so much, Melinda, for coming on. I'm distracted today because my son is leaving for college for the first time tomorrow, and I'm trying not to cry. So I'm just going to get this episode up on the internet for you, and you guys can download it and listen, and I will pack a car and try not to sob. Okay, on that note, thank you so much for listening. I appreciate so much that you spend an hour every week with me. I hope this podcast has been valuable for you. I love doing it, and I don't know. I'm all emotional today, so ignore all this.